So very good afternoon to all of you. We'll be starting from French Revolution. Yesterday we had started our discussion on world history, and initially we discussed about few topics which are important so that the basics of the world history can become very easy for you. So we discussed about Renaissance, we discussed about Reformation, we also had a little bit of discussion about the initial imperialism. Then we discussed few topics which are directly in our syllabus like enlightenment. Then we also took one topic, that is American War of Independence. UPSC में जैसे क्वेश्चन जब आते हैं, every year they ask one question from enlightenment, every year they ask one question from American topics. American topics include not just War of Independence, Civil War as well as their Constitution. काफी सारे topics हैं, वो बाद में करेंगे कुछ कुछ करके. Let us start from French Revolution. Now, when we were discussing yesterday about 18th century, 18th century Europe was affected by lots of problems. In the political field, the problems included despotism, no separation of power. In the economic field, the taxation system, it was unjust. Okay, normally अगर आज हम taxation system देखते हैं, it is very progressive in nature. जैसे जैसे income increase होती है, आपका income tax increase होता चला जाता है, rates increase होती हैं. But in those times, the most weakest people, like yesterday we were discussing about peasants or farmer, the peasants, they were paying 80% of the income as taxes. It was very difficult to change your profession. Guilds were trying to control each and every profession. If you see, society was, the biggest problem in society was built upon privileges. Okay, it was built upon privileges. The nobility was having maximum number of privileges, and these privileges were supported by both church as well as the king or the monarchy. Both of them, they were ensuring privileges for certain section of the society. Privilege का मतलब क्या होता है? Privilege means आपको टैक्स नहीं देना है. Privilege means you could have unaccessible hunting rights वगैरह आपको मिल गए बहुत ज़्यादा, किसी भी एरिया में आप जा सकते हो, ठीक है. Privileges means you have serfs, you are feudal lords. So those privileges were affecting each and every person. In fact, if we see the case of France, France was divided into 3 estates. Estates means 3 sections. Okay, the first estate, it was about church. Okay, and within church we used to have priests who were also known as clergy. The second estate, it belonged to nobility, those people who were in higher government functionaries. And finally we had the third estate. If you see combined population of the first 2 estates, it was hardly 2%. Get that? 2%. But these people were having or enjoying around 35% of the wealth. While this third estate, it was composed of 98% of the population. It was getting affected by the order of 18th century. So as a result of this, French society, it was not happy with the state of things, and things were bound to change, but it required a catalyst. कोई एक specific event होना चाहिए जिसमें कुछ ऐसा हो पाए. And in France, those events came in 18th century. French Revolution, it happened in 1789. The kind of regime that I've been talking about, such regime is known as ancient regime. Ancient regime means a regime which is bounded by privileges, which is bounded by despotism, which is bounded by the privileges enjoyed by church, nobility, plus pre-revolution France. Okay, so pre-revolution France, it is known as ancient regime, and it was under the control of absolute monarchy. The ruling dynasty, yesterday we had discussed the Louis, okay, starting from Louis XI, the dynasty which came into control, it was Bourbon dynasty, and the ruler at this point of time was King Louis XVI. Society was divided into three estates, we have discussed: clergy, nobility, and third estate. And these people, they were taxed heavily, they bore the burden of supporting the other estate. So देखो इतनी इनइक्वल सोसाइटी में बहुत प्रॉब्लम्स आनी ही आनी है, आज नहीं तो कल. When it's going to happen? And there's a very famous quote that poverty is the parent of all revolutions, and the same thing could be witnessed even in the French Revolution. If you see King Louis XVI, he ruled with absolute power. Okay, the biggest problem with this, he was having a very lavish lifestyle. In fact, there was a palace in Versailles. This Versailles palace was very famous, and it belonged to this dynasty. Heavy taxes, they burdened the common people who lacked the basic necessities like food. In fact, he was married to one of the queen. Her name is Queen Marie Antoinette. So Marie Antoinette, she was completely unaware दुनिया में क्या चल रहा है. Okay, so at one point of time, people came that we want bread. We do not have nothing to survive. So if people do not having bread, they should eat cake. So this is the level of her oblivious that कुछ पता ही नहीं दुनियादारी में चल क्या रहा है. So that's why the kind of society, the kind of economy, and the kind of polity which was existing in France, a revolution was going to happen one day, today or tomorrow. होना ही होना है. But the biggest issue was that what specific events are going to drive it. Okay, this is one of the most famous scene, that is the storming of Bastille. इसके बारे में बाद में बात करेंगे. But first let us understand the causes of revolution. One of the major section of the third estate, it was peasantry. In fact, out of 98%, 80% were peasants, right? Industrial revolution had not started in France. It only starts in the England in the 18th century. 19th century के आसपास वो France में आएगा. So the peasantry made up the bulk of the French society. As I've told you, that they were around 80% of the population. Second, they had to work certain days for their lords without any kind of remuneration. It means serfdom. Okay, serfdom was there. Number 3, they could not marry or dispose of their land without the lord's permission, and it has been estimated that they paid 80% of their earning to various form of taxes. अब किसी की income ले लोगे 80%, will they be left with anything surplus? No, no surplus was left. And that's why there's a historian, Carlyle, wrote that 1/3 of them had nothing but third-rate potatoes to eat for 1/3 of the year. है ना, जिंदगी में लगभग 4 से 5 महीने ये लोग सिर्फ पोटैटोज खा रहे थे, and that too of third rate. They were not that much of good quality. And as I was discussing yesterday, 4/5 of the people, they were dying of starvation, and 1/5 of the people, 20% of the people, they were dying because of indigestion. This was the state of France. And in such a state, okay, in such a state, everybody wanted their own share in the pie. Okay, हर किसी को चाहिए कि भाई हमें भी resources में कुछ मिलना चाहिए. The first estate or the clergy, they were the most people linked to religion. They had very high social status and significant land ownership. In fact, 10% of the complete land of France, it was under the control of clergy. Church के अंडर ही था वो, ठीक है? And they used to levy taxes on that. And they were exempted from taxes and tithe. Tithe was a kind of tax which was collected from the people. Just जो भी land used to be under the control of the church. Aristocracy, it was having privileges. They were exempted from all the taxes, and at the same time all the government offices. जैसे आज की डेट में हम privileged jobs किनको बोलते हैं? IAS, IPS, IRS, all these are privileged jobs. This is the aristocracy that we have modern, even though civil services is the most apt word used for it, but in general, when we say from bureaucracy point of view, this is the aristocracy of today. So aristocracy of those times of France could only come from one estate, and that was that of nobles. Normal people, they were not allowed to enter the high offices under the government. And finally, the third estate, everybody remaining person. Third estate was also having rich people. Don't understand that उनके में कोई था ही नहीं. They also had this middle class which was having resources, but majority of them, they were peasant or urban workers. Okay, and the problem was they were having the maximum taxation burden known by various taxes were the tail, gabelle was a salt tax, tobacco tax, to support the monarchy and other estate, and they lacked political power and social mobility. In France, there was a parliament. This parliament was known by the name Estates General. यहाँ थोड़ा सा आप ध्यान रखना. Okay, there are going to be few terms which you need to remember. Estate General was the Parliament. But this Estate General met for the last time in 1614, and from 1614 till 1789 there was no sitting of Parliament. So no popular representative body was functionable. जैसे हमारा देखा लोकसभा में मैक्सिमम कितना लोकसभा का वेटिंग पीरियड हो सकता है बिटवीन टू सेशंस? मैक्सिमम हो सकता है 6 months 6 weeks. दैट्स द मैक्सिमम. अब इनका क्या हुआ? 175 years हो गए. कितना? 175 years. It means the democratically elected body was not functionable in France. And why it was not functionable? Because the king was having the maximum power. The king did not require their support. However, this estate general was also divided just like the society. And all the three estates, estate number 1, second estate, and estate 3, all of them, they used to vote as a house. जैसे आज की डेट में कभी भी कोई भी बिल पास करना होता है तो there is a voting within the house itself कि भाई हाँ कितने लोगों ने उसको पास कर दिया. But here it's not going to be on the basis of number. It's only on the basis of the number of the house. So one house, one vote. And you tell me which two are always going to be on the same side, the first and the second. वो क्यों यार दूर जाएंगे? अच्छी लाइफ चल रही है उनकी. In fact, those people who were clergy, they were not allowed to marry. So naturally, clergy भी फिर कौन से वाले से एंटर करते थे बाद में? From the nobility. वही उससे धीरे धीरे करके उसमें एंटर करते रहते थे इवन इन द फर्स्ट स्टेट. दैट्स व्हाई सब अच्छा चल रहा था. एवरीथिंग वाज गोइंग स्वेल. बट द प्रॉब्लम अराइजेस बिकॉज द होल फ्रांस वाज गोइंग थ्रू अ फेज ऑफ इकोनॉमिक crisis. And when economic crisis started, it required certain kind of measures to be taken, which eventually led us towards a revolution. So let us try to understand what were the discontent and the seeds of the revolution. Revolution start क्यों हुआ? We have seen, yes, lots of problems were there in their polity, economy, society, religion. Everywhere there were one or the other problem. But revolution does not start just because there are factors. Okay, they start because they eventually required reforms. They start because there was somebody to lead it. It required a major spark. So the heavy taxation burden of the third estate, inequality and lack of political voice, etc. They were there in each and every country. It was not just France. Same thing was happening in Austria, same thing was there in England, and in many of the countries of the world, same kind of issues were there. But why France became the center spot for the revolution? That is the one thing which we need to understand. And that happened because of one major factor, and that one major factor, it is financial bankruptcy. Please remember this. France had a revolution because they were having financial bankruptcy. This financial bankruptcy happened, one, because of luxurious lifestyle of the king, and second, because of the wars which were fought by them. Yesterday we had discussed 7-year war. We have also discussed about the American War of Independence. In both these wars, who participated? France participated. Okay, France ने participate किया, and as a result of this, it has spent enormous sum of money on the 7-year war, and later on they also supported the American colonies. This eventually led the France to bankruptcy. By 1787, American War of Independence ended in 1783. By 1787, जैसे हमारा ना Consolidated Fund of India, the French coffers or French treasury, it was empty. पैसा ही नहीं है लोगों के पास. अब क्या करें? The government always borrows. जैसे अभी अपनी गवर्नमेंट भी बोरो करती है money every year, but it is not for their revenue expenditure. It is for the capital expenditure. कि हम asset create कर रहे हैं. We are not going to consume it. But what was happening in France? They were just consuming whatever they were taking on loan, and it is a big problem for them. And as a result of this, they had to summon a state general. Okay, that's why they had to summon a state general. The parliament was not summoned since 1614, and it was summoned in 1789. Why? Because they wanted the support of a state general. Let me tell you the story briefly, what exactly happened. By 1787, the king realized that we are going to fail as a country if some economic reforms are not done. But what kind of economic reforms can you do? What was the possibility with them? Yes, the only thing that they could do, that they could levy taxes, and these taxes could only be levied on which estate? The first and the Second estate, because they were having the privileges. Third estate was already paying 70-80% of its income as taxes. तो कहाँ पे लेवी कर सकते हैं? First and second estate. However, these people were very resistant in nature. They said, no, you cannot put any kind of tax on us. The king was weak. Their king, King Louis XVI, he was a weak person. And what is the problem with weak person? They are not able to take decisions very decisively. नहीं ले पाते, आज कुछ बात करें, कल कुछ और, परसों कुछ और, है ना? That's why मोदी जी चाहिए हमें, है ना? We don't need weak people, because when weak people come into the governance, decision making suffers a lot. So what happened as a result? He was not able to take any conclusive decision. Then he passed the resolution that there should be taxation on the first and second estate. Okay, he passed the resolution. However, there was a specific law-making process in France that whatever is passed by the king, it should be registered by a body which is known as parliament. अब देखो यही confusion होता है इसमें कई बार. A state general is parliament, but parliament is a law registering body. It's a law registering body. Whatever is the command of the king will not become a law unless it is eventually passed by the or registered by parliament. This parliament itself used to have member from nobility. तो आपको लगता है कि nobility के जो लोग हैं जिनके ऊपर taxation लगने वाला है ये इसको पास करने वाले हैं? No. This parliament came out in revolt. They said king does not have the authority to levy any kind of taxes. अगर आज अपना constitution देखोगे, does prime minister or president have the any kind of authority to levy taxes? No. हर tax कौन लगाता है? Parliament. Okay? Parliament लगाता है हर. Same kind of argument was put forward by this parliament. They said any kind of tax could only be put by one body, and that is a States General, which was not summoned in 1614. 175 साल हो चुके थे उसको. What these people were trying to do, they were trying to just play with the king. They were just trying to make sure कि 2-4 दिन में मामला ठंडा पड़ जाएगा, हम इसको परेशान कर लेते हैं. King thought, okay, let us summon a state general. A weak person will, what will this do? They will eventually say, चलो ठीक है, ये भी करके देख लेते हैं. So as a result of this, when king summoned the States General, this State General started asking for same kind of rights like that of first and second estate. They said we want similar kind of treatment. Why are we getting that kind of treatment where we are paying all the taxes and we are not having any kind of access to the king? We are not having any access to the important institutions of France. So how can we survive in such a country? So that's why we see the beginning of the revolution starts with the enforcement of the king's order and the summoning of a state general. The moment a state general is summoned, eventually what do we see? We see a complete change of the reality in France. अभी उसको discuss करेंगे. But before that, let us just briefly talk about that who were the people who were responsible for creating such a situation in France. There were some people who were known as intellectuals. Okay, these intellectuals, most famous personality, first one was Montesquieu, second was Voltaire, and third was Rousseau. These people were criticizing the various institutions of France. Like Montesquieu, when you read polity, he is the person responsible for the separation of power. He came out with this concept that legislative, executive and judiciary, these three powers should not be exercised by one person. They should be separated. This is what is the meaning of separation of power. Similarly, we had Voltaire. Voltaire said that the church has become a kind of den for superstitions. It is not taking care of the spiritual urges of the people. What is it doing? It is eventually creating a kind of problem for them. It is becoming a very corrupt body. Similarly, Rousseau also said that if a government is not taking care of its people, if it is not following the social contract, eventually such a government can be overthrown. So such kind of resistant attitude among the people against the institution was inculcated by a brand of intellectual. That's why we always say that French Revolution was not possible without the role of these intellectuals. ठीक है, तो हमेशा ध्यान रखना that these people, they had championed the ideas of enlightenment. They told people that you should think for yourself, reason out. Can you see any kind of positive in these kind of political, social, economic and cultural institutions? We should change them. And that kind of urge came from them. Okay, and that's why their writings challenge the legitimacy of ancient regime. It is very important. They challenge the legitimacy. Like Montesquieu, written The Spirit of Laws, advocated for separation of power, limiting the absolute monarchy. In fact, Montesquieu has visited England, and there he had already seen the way in which the parliament was functioning. And he realized कि भाई नहीं ऐसा ही कुछ होना चाहिए. Otherwise, France will never have any kind of progress. Voltaire, okay, so Voltaire has written The Age of Louis XIV, criticized the religious authority and the monarchy's administration. Rousseau, he came out with a very famous theory of social contract, and he proposed a social contract between rulers and ruled, emphasizing just government and the right of revolution against tyranny. And he is somebody who is very famous for this quote. He says that man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains. So this is the opening line of his theory, the social contract. So France, yes, it was very volatile. It was affected by bankruptcy. When bankruptcy came, its institutions were not able to handle it. The king was required to come out with a resolution, but the king was very weak. He could not even ensure that his orders are followed by this law registering body, parliament. है ना, उसने भी बात नहीं मानी. And that's why, being a timid person, he said, let's go for the summoning of a state general. So this state general was finally summoned in 1789, and thereafter the thing completely changed. This is what is known as the beginning of French Revolution. When now many of you will say कि यार ये कैसा revolution हुआ, कुछ बड़ा होना चाहिए था, मजेदार होना चाहिए था, तो वो होता है इसमें. This is just the beginning. Okay, this French Revolution is something which is very, very important in world history. Why? Because people started taking care of their rights. This was for the first time we see these three major ideals: equality, liberty and fraternity, which became the watchword of the French Revolution. For the first time we see this. Okay, and so whenever we talk about the beginning of French Revolution, it is the summoning of the meeting of a state general. NCERT में इतनी डिटेल में नहीं दिया हुआ, मैंने आपको एक broad idea दे दिया है what was French Parliament, so that when later on we are going to have main classes for this, you'll already know the terms at least. French Parliament, a state general was the parliament, all those ideas I have given it to you. The first to a state, the clergy and nobility, they had sent how many representatives? Around 300. Around 300 representatives को send किया. While the third estate, it sent how many delegates? Around 600. Now these people said that when a state general used to meet previously, okay, there was no provision for joint sitting. First estate, second estate and third estate, all these three used to have one vote each, and whoever used to get 2 votes out of 3, that decision used to be passed. That is the reason why the French Parliament in the first place said कि a state general को summon करो. However, as we have just seen, how many representatives came from first? Around 300, but here they were around 612. Okay, around 612. And why was it done? It was done that because people knew कि in the future, जब ये इसका नंबर डबल कर रहे थे ना, 600 कर रहे थे, तो first and second state they were laughing कि भाई ऐसा क्यों करके फायदा क्या होगा? Why? Because the voting is going to be 1 vote per house. However, the moment these people came to Paris, they said we want 2 specific things. First, we want a common house. We are not going to sit in 3 different houses. हमें क्या चाहिए? Common house चाहिए. Plus, the voting should be on the basis of per man basis rather than on the basis of the house. This completely shook the supremacy of first and second estate. वो दोनों परेशान हो गए, भाई ऐसी डिमांड्स कहां से लेके आ गए लोग. And why was it required? The moment this happens, 612 is numerically superior to 600. So now whatever resolution will be taken by the third estate naturally is going to win. So this is what the French Revolution is all about, where people are trying to take everything in their own hands. But the whole process was not that much smooth. They met in May. May में पहली बार मिलते हैं 1789 में. Thereafter, let us try to understand. They met They put forward the demand on 17th of June in front of the king कि हमें ये दो चीजें चाहिए. The king said no. Okay, नहीं हो पाएगा. Still they declared themselves as National Assembly, that we are a National Assembly. Then when they were coming for the meeting on 20th of June, 3 दिन बाद जब वो वापस आ रहे थे, so they found that the parliament is closed or the Estate General is closed. They said we are not going to go away. So they went to a very close by tennis court and they took an oath on 20th of June. And they said we are not going to go back to our constituencies till we create a constitution for France. So that is how the whole circle changes. एक टाइम पे इकोनॉमिक क्राइसिस से स्टार्ट हुआ था, है ना, इकोनॉमी फेल कर रही थी, कुछ स्टेप्स ले लेते तो वहीं के वहीं काम खत्म हो जाता. बट द ब्यूरोक्रेसी एज वेल एज द फर्स्ट एंड द सेकंड स्टेट, दे केम आउट विद द आइडिया कि भाई इसको एक तरीके से खराब करके एस्टेट जनरल को समन करवा लेते, टाइम पास करते हैं. However, this came out completely in a different manner, and thereafter this demand was to be accepted by the king, and king accepted this demand by 27th of June. Okay, he accepted the demand by 27th of June. In fact, the king himself was not very happy. He was not very happy कि यार मेरे से बहुत आर्म ट्विस्टिंग करके इन लोगों ने ना ये बात मनवाई है. So what he was trying to do, he was just trying to bide his time. उन्होंने एक्सेप्ट कर लिया, and side by side army started coming into Paris. There was a very famous minister known as Necker. Okay, a famous minister, Necker. Necker was the one who was supporting changes. That's why king first dismissed him, and the coming of the army started. When army started coming into Paris, people thought कि भाई हम लोगों को crush कर देंगे ये, and the whole gains of the revolution so far, whatever we have acquired, they are going to become zero, and we have to stop it somehow. That's why on 14th of July, people went into this famous fort, which is known as the Fall of Bastille. It was a famous fort of Bourbon dynasty. It was also utilized as a prison. And there was a common understanding, जो एक बार इस जेल में चला गया कभी वापस जिंदा नहीं आता. That's why people thought कि let us now break this fort of Bastille and take all the weapons which are there so that they can have a fight with the army. So this is how the 14th July becomes a very important date in the history of France, and it is known as their national day. अभी मोदी जी लास्ट ईयर गए भी थे on 14th of July. He went to France. जैसे हमारा रिपब्लिक डे है ना, उस दिन हम काफी डिग्निटरीज को बुलाते हैं. They do the same on 14th of July, and that's why it becomes famous. Why? Because the power has now completely shifted into the hands of people. अब लोग पीछे नहीं हटने वाले हैं. In fact, on 14th of July, King Louis XVI told to one of his minister that this is a very big revolt, and his minister replied, "Sir, this is not a revolt. This is a revolution." अब कहानी खत्म हो गई. And why is it important? Because after this, some very important announcements came. After 14 July, by 4th of August, all the privileges which were given to first estate and the second estate, they were taken down. सारी privilege खत्म कर दी. Next, by 26th of August, there comes a famous declaration of rights, that what minimum rights can be expected by the citizens from its state, which gave them all the fundamental rights like right to equality, right to property. All those rights were given to the people. That's why please try to understand, even though the French Revolution, it started because of an economic problem, but the moment it started, its focus started shifting towards privileges, that we want equality, we want liberty from all institutions, and we also want fraternity. This is how the French Revolution, which starts in May 1789, goes to its full flow by August. August तक अपने full flow में आ जाता है. And after this declaration of rights, this body is now going to focus on the constitution. Constitution draft करेंगे. जैसे हमारी constitution हमने कितना टाइम लिया था? 1946 में मिले थे दिसंबर में, है ना? हाँ, तो काफी सारा टाइम ले लिया था हम लोगों ने, तो 2.5 साल से ऊपर ले गए थे हम लोग. Anyway, so that is what you need to remember. So they also took some time. when they were drafting their constitution, okay, when they were drafting their constitution, initially they thought they're going to create a constitutional monarchy. They were trying to create a constitutional monarchy because they were not as such against Bourbon dynasty. However, when they were ready with the draft by 1791, something awkward happened. The king tried to flee France. Okay, जिसके लिए 2 साल से constitution बना रहे हैं, he tried to flee. And there is a very important detail which you should remember. His wife, Queen Mary Antoinette, she was linked to Austria. So he was trying to go to Austria. The reason being, all the other countries like Austria, at that time there was no Germany, Austria, Prussia, these countries were very afraid. Why? Because what was happening in France could happen in their countries next. People will demand their rights, absolute monarchy will go away. That is the reason they were also ready to support the royal dynasty of France and crush this French Revolution. And this was a very big problem for the people of France. And that's why when king tried to flee, this is also famously known as flight to Versailles. After this, people lost their faith in their king. कि भाई हमारा king जो है पता नहीं वो क्या करना चाहता लाइफ में. And as a result, and fiercely advocated by a club known as Jacobean, they eventually said that we are going to have a republic. In fact, the king was executed by Jan 1793 on the charges of treason. That when we are fighting against our neighbors, when we are fighting against outer countries, how can our king abandon us? So this flight to Versailles remains a very critical chapter in the history of France and French Revolution. And as a result, he was given death sentence by Jan 1793. The moment he is given death sentence, from 1793 till the mid of 1794, a person rises and his name was Robespierre. He was a person who was linked to Jacobean Club. Okay, Jacobean Club, it was a club, okay, which was having lots of membership in the State General or the National Convention, and they were having a huge base among the industrial workers. So Robespierre, he started a phenomenon where he tried to safeguard France against the outer countries. And that's why during this phase, we have one specific thing which is known as Reign of Terror, where anybody who was suspected of being against the ideals of French Revolution, they were guillotined. Guillotined, it's a phenomena, एक तरीके का machine होता है, in which your neck is completely adjusted, है ना, और एक बार बस ऊपर से punch करते हैं and your skull completely goes out. So this is why even in our constitution there is a phenomenon of guillotine. जब bills वगैरह के discuss कर रहे होते हैं clause by clause, last में जब time नहीं बचता तो what do they say? Guillotine करो, काम खत्म करो, सबको एक साथ डालो, okay कर दो. That's why during these 1.5 years from Jan 1793 to July 1794, in fact in July 1794 Robespierre himself was guillotined. उनको ही खत्म कर दिया था कि भाई जिससे स्टार्ट किया था उसी के साथ में अंत हो गया. And thereafter some sanity came back to France and they again created one more constitution which was run by a government of directory. Directory means a government of 5 people. Major 5 people were there who were running the show. This directory remained prominent from 1795 to 1799, roughly for 4 years. However, the power was captured in 1799 by one of the tallest personality in world history, and his name is Napoleon. And they came out with a kind of government which is known as consulate government, and he became the first consul in 1799 and continued like this till 1804, because in 1804 he coronated himself, अपने आप को king बना लिया. So the whole history of France is having lots of problems, up and down, lots of ups and downs. कभी कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन बनाने जाते हैं, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन बनाते हैं तो किंग भाग जाता है, ओके, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मोनार्की से फिर रिपब्लिक बनाते हैं, रिपब्लिक बनाते हैं तो इवेंचुअली दैट आल्सो फेल्स, देन दे वेंट फॉर डायरेक्टरी, डायरेक्टरी फेल्स बिकॉज नेपोलियन गोज फॉर अ कूप. By 1804 he himself becomes the king of France. So that's why from 1789 till 1799 we often consider that the French Revolution was roughly for 10 years, and then we see the beginning of the age of Napoleon. Okay, so revolution is from 1789 to 1799, and Napoleon is from 1799 till his final downfall, and that is the famous battle of Waterloo. Okay, 1815 is his famous battle of Waterloo. UPSC every year asks one question from French Revolution or Napoleon every year. Okay, you should be very completely aware about कहाँ से क्वेश्चन आते हैं. Enlightenment से हर बार एक क्वेश्चन आता है, अमेरिकन के जो टॉपिक्स हैं 3-4 उनसे मिला के क्वेश्चन हमेशा आता है, एक क्वेश्चन हमेशा फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन से आता है. तो यू शुड बी अवेयर अबाउट द बेसिक डिटेल्स सो दैट लेटर ऑन व्हेन वी विल डिस्कस दीस टॉपिक्स इन डिटेल यू कैन एटलीस्ट हैव एन आइडिया एंड यू कैन कैप्चर द पीवाईक्यूज और इजीली उनको हम सॉल्व भी कर पाए. सो फ्रॉम द पीपीटी वी हैड डिस्कस्ड लाइक टिल दिस 14th of July we see the storming of Bastille. Okay, Bastille is it's a very important day in the history of France, and that's why it is a French national day. Okay, and the reason I have already told you, the king was trying to bring in army into Paris. People thought they have to survive somehow, and that's why they went into Bastille in order to get some kind of weapons. Then eventually we see one of the most important thing that we have discussed. All right, in August 1789 they were able to create the Declaration of Rights, and in 1791 they came out with the National Assembly drafted the Constitution. The Constitution was drafted, and many new features were brought in. Right to vote was given to certain percentage of the population, and this constitution making, it took a lot of time. Okay, even though Declaration of Right, it came on August 26, 1789. The principles which were there, limited monarchy should be there, individual and collective rights should be there for the community. And who were the major influences? The ideas of enlightenment, okay, as well as Thomas Jefferson's ideas on equality. As we know, already by that time America had drafted their own constitution, so that constitution was also in front of them, and they were able to borrow some of the ideas from that also. This is the phase of constitution making. Okay, then there is also a very important role of women in this French Revolution that we need to understand. Why are we reading about this? Because even though they participated, they were not given the equivalent rights by this declaration. That's why we should know about it. In fact, the Women's March on Versailles is one of the most significant chapter in the history of French Revolution. And then Olympique de Gouges, she was one of the powerful lady, and she advocated eventually that there should be rights for the women, and in fact she authored her own Declaration of Rights and of Citizens demanding female equality. So when we talk about feminist movements, this is one of the first phase in the history of the world where we see some people, some women specifically, asking for equal rights. That's why कभी भी essay वगैरह आप लोग लिख रहे हो तो you can quote her name, Olympique de Gouges, who said that we have participated, okay, in the revolution, and the fruits are only being enjoyed by the men. How is this an equality? That's why France is always a way ahead with respect to the feminine rights. In fact, you must have seen in the current affairs recently, right to abortion has been given in France, right? So, and in fact made a fundamental right. So many feminist movements have emerged in France, and this French Revolution, this is one of the first stage of that. Then war against Austria and Prussia. This war starts, as I already said, the National Assembly declared war against them. Why? Because Austria, it was having direct linkages with the king, and after his flight, eventually they started the war against them. In fact, there was one Duke of Brunswick. He had given a proclamation, if anything happens to the royal family, I'm going to burn down the city of Paris. पूरे पेरिस को जला दूंगा अगर कुछ भी हो गया तो इनको. That further increased the kind of grievance among the people of France, and eventually they led the war. So many clubs were formed. अब इनके अंदर ज्यादा नहीं जाते हैं, but थोड़ा सा आइडिया लगा लो. This Jacobian, two famous clubs were there. One club was that of Jacobians. Okay, so this was a prominent club representing the lower classes. जितना भी artist, labor, Paris के आसपास रहते थे, they had become part of the Jacobian club. And these Jacobians, they were having their representation in the parliament, and they were led by Maximilian Robespierre. And then this is a keyword which you can remember for your answer writing also, sans culottes. Sans culottes, this is the word which is utilized for whom? Those without knee breeches. In fact, it symbolizes working class identity and a core Jacobian membership. जो भी पेरिस के आसपास की working class थी, उसको हम क्या बोलते थे? Sans culottes. There were some other clubs also like Cordelier Club. Okay. Then the biggest rivalry in France, it was between Girondins and Jacobians. Girondin was one of the province. So those people who used to come from that province, they were known as Girondists. Okay, एक province था Girondist, वहां से जो भी आता था क्या बोलते थे? Girondin. जैसे जो भी लोग बिहार से आते हैं, ये कहाँ से? ये बिहारी है. Why? Because they come from Bihar. So similarly, in France, there was a province known as Girondists, and from these people known as Girondists. Now, these Girondins and Jacobians, they used to fight. Okay, they used to fight over many matters. The Jacobians, they wanted that the king should be completely brought down. Okay, the moment they realized that the king had tried to flee, they said that king should be executed, plus a republic should be brought in. However, the Girondins, they were not in favor of that. So that's why there was always rivalry between these two, and eventually later on, when the reign of terror started, many these Girondins, they were executed or they were guillotined. So different kinds of people were there. Lafayette, that we were discussing yesterday, General Lafayette was a very famous personality. He went to America also. Then he was also responsible for the success of French Revolution during its initial days. Okay, and he was leading one specific organization which was in the Paris itself. Okay, so Lafayette was very prominent person, and he was responsible for leading the initial phase of French Revolution, known as Paris Commune. Okay, National Guard भी बोलते थे उसको. तो नेशनल गार्ड जो थे उसको ये लीड करते थे. Then this national convention, which as we have discussed, जो 1791 के बाद अपने आप को चेंज कर लेती है, it continues. Okay, 1791 के बाद in 1792 we see the coming of national convention. Again the work is same. एक constitution बनाया, but the king tried to flee. अब करे क्या? Now they have to make their constitution again. That's why this legislative assembly, okay, this was replaced by the national convention. बाकी इसकी डिटेल बाद में करेंगे. अभी आप लोगों को इतना डिटेल में अंदर जाने की जरूरत नहीं है, वो आराम से बाद में करेंगे. After downfall of Robespierre, we have this government known as Directory. Okay, it suppressed royalist uprisings and Thermodin वहाँ पे एक कैलेंडर सिस्टम था, and they faced rebellion for both royalists and revolutionaries, and that's why they created a 5-man ruling body. उसको हम क्या बोलते हैं? Directory. 5 people, they're going to rule and they're going to control the whole administration. That's why it's known as Directory. However, in 1799, the power was taken forward by Napoleon. So Napoleon became the major hotshot, and he was able to come out with a coup. And the rest of the history, it is linked with the history of Napoleon. वहाँ पे नेपोलियन की हिस्ट्री आती है. ठीक है. What is the overall impact of French Revolution on the world? अगर हम इसकी बात करें, there are so many important things which we can remember. First thing which is very clear, it fought against privileges. It wanted equality. For the first time, equality के ऊपर इतना focus किसी revolution ने किया. Second, it also introduced republican form of government with electoral rights. Feudal system was abolished. Slavery was abolished, though it took some more years for total abolition. Church lost its supremacy. In fact, they came out with a system where the priests were elected. Priests आप कहीं भी elect नहीं होते. They came out with a system that the priests are going to get elected for the first time. So church lost its supremacy, all of its money. Okay, it was completely seized by the state. Declaration of Right of Man and Citizen brought the importance of collective rights for any community. 3 organs of the government, legislative, executive, and judiciary, they became prominent, and they kept a check and balance on each other. So it was about separation of powers, And all over Europe, the French Revolution gave the hope to the common people. Okay, because all the people who were suffering in the same manner, it was the France which led them. And in fact, starting from 1789 till 1871, France is going to be a dominant country and often considered as an intellectual head of Europe. The moment a revolution will start in France, it is going to spread far and wide every time. Like revolutions happened in 1789 to 1799, then in 1830, 1848, and every time the Europe also was caught in the same kind of response. That's why they become the major leader of Europe. Okay, तो फ्रांस के बारे में एक चीज ध्यान रखनी है, it became the intellectual head the moment it was able to have this revolution. हमेशा हर बार गाइडेंस के लिए यही सबसे आगे आएंगे. Then we'll see the rest of the topic later on, but now let us switch towards industrial revolution. Why industrial revolution? Because 18th century, it's also the beginning of industrial revolution. So let us try to understand this. So industrial revolution, whenever somebody uses this word, what is the meaning of this? Adoption of a system of producing commodities on a large scale in huge factories. In fact, machine-based production, factory-based production, large-scale production, it is linked with industrial revolution. Industries are something which were not that much famous in the early 18th century, but slowly England was able to become the harbinger. It could become the birthplace of industrial revolution, and we'll try to understand it. If we see the industrial revolution, it has many phases. I hope all of you know that right now we are going through the which phase? Fourth phase of industrial revolution. And in fact, we are already talking about the fifth phase. The moment AI or this is going to become very superior, that is going to be considered as the fifth phase of industrial revolution. Okay, generative AI जब उस level पे आ जाएगा, normally it is going to be considered as fifth phase. Anyway, so the first phase, it was mostly led by which industry? Cotton industry. अब ध्यान रखना, the first phase of industrial revolution, it was led by which industry? Cotton. Maximum innovation happened in the cotton, and later on, okay, later on it was led by iron. The second industrial revolution, it was led by iron. Iron became very popular, and various kinds of processes were utilized. And the moment we see the production of iron on large scale, it helped in the rise of infrastructure in the countries. So cotton was very important from the point of view of the first industrial revolution, and in the later one, we see the rise of other specific features. What are the major features of an industrial revolution? Number one, it's going to be science-based revolution. Why science-based? Because scientific principles were applied to improve the industrial processes. Without innovation, without technology, can we have industrial revolution? No, it can never happen. In fact, you have to remember it all the time. UPSC can ask this question, that why did industrial revolution started in England? There were so many factors responsible for that, but the most important factor, the most catalytic factor, it is the science. Okay, जैसा fourth industrial revolution है, उसको इंडिया लीड कर रहा है, यूएसए लीड कर रहा है, यूएसए लीड कर रहा है. ओपन एआई कहाँ पे? इंडिया में थोड़ा ना है ना. When he came to India, we asked कि भाई हम also, we can also lead AI. He said don't try. Sam Altman, he said don't try, we are going to be ahead of you. What's the reason for that? Because they are far ahead of us in the innovation. We are far ahead in जुगाड़. जुगाड़ में हम लोग सबसे आगे हैं to make things work somehow. But when it comes to pure innovation, USA is far ahead of us. That's why every industrial revolution requires science. Use of new materials. Okay, science, steel, they become dominant material for machine as well as infrastructure. Why? Because if you want to make machines should be durable in nature. And when they will be durable? When they have very high level of raw material. And what is that going to be? Iron and steel. New energy sources. Previously, majority of the production, it used to happen in the homes. But now, coal, steam, electricity, they replace the traditional fuels like water and or mechanization of very high level. Maximum number of machines were created. Now the people were required to operate them, not work individually. Factory system. Previously home-based production was there. Now that was shifted towards factory. Transportation and communication. This also improved with the period of time. And finally, the most important thing, that is mass production. So if you can remember these points, it can help you in your answer writing. अभी हम कुछ answers लिखेंगे day after tomorrow. So please remember that industrial revolution is a very important topic, and in fact UPSC asks question every year. Now let us try to understand what were the causes of industrial revolution in England. Why England became the major face of industries in 18th century. There were so many factors which were linked to this. Like number one, economic and trade factors. If we look at them, yesterday we had discussed the word commercial revolution. So the first important keyword is commercial revolution. People had already gained a lot because of commercial revolution. They were having the wealth, and when they were having the wealth, they were ready to invest. So that's why पैसा हाथ में नहीं होगा तो इन्वेस्टमेंट कैसे करोगे? Like when somebody says what are the four factors of any production, तो उनमें क्या क्या होगा? Land, labor, then we have capital. Without capital we cannot have industries, we cannot run any major offices. That's why commercial revolution has already happened in England. Second, colonial supremacy. They were able to capture large parts in the world, and that's why from there also they were getting the wealth which could again be utilized for the creation of industry. Then expanding domestic market. The population had increased drastically. Like right now when somebody asks about कि India की जो GDP growth rate है वो ज़्यादा क्यों होगी, so we always say that we have very high level of youth population. We have demography by our side, जो कि अभी 2040-2045 तक हम सब youth लोग आते ही रहेंगे. We'll have the highest labor force in the world, in fact. So that is nothing but that is the expansion of domestic market. When the population increases, it increases your potential for the growth. However, there should be equivalent opportunities. अगर jobs नहीं होंगी तो demographic dividend की जगह demographic क्या जाता है? Disaster बन जाता है. Because jobs नहीं होंगे तो crime rate increase होगा. Wealth from colonies, political and social factors. One of the biggest reason why industrial revolution started in England, not in France, is their political stability. France was always in the fighting mode. Britain, it is an island. Okay, it was never invaded before the world wars. World wars में पहली बार उसको invade किया गया है. उससे पहले वो कभी invade ही नहीं हुआ. So that's why it is having political stability, and people are of conservative mindset. They are not like French कि हर तीसरे दिन पेरिस की स्ट्रीट पे आके चलो revolution करते हैं. That is in the blood. Nobody can do anything about it. 1789, 1830, 1848, large number of revolutions line by line. Napoleon always fighting in the continental Europe. So that's why political stability and liberal environment fostered industrial development. Then you also require raw material. If raw material is missing, तो ये सब होने के बाद भी कुछ नहीं होने वाला. Next is abundant coal and iron. So they were very close by. In fact, many of you would know the concept of their weight losing industry. बहुत सारा इनके अंदर से unnecessary चीजें निकलती हैं. तो अगर जितना पास में होता है, ट्रांसपोर्टेशन का कॉस्ट कम हो जाता है. That's why that was also a natural factor in the case of England. Agriculture advances also. In England, they had went through various methods to improve the output of agriculture. In fact, there was one enclosure movement through which they did consolidation of land holding. ऐसे इंडिया में आज के टाइम में सबसे बड़ा प्रॉब्लम क्या है इन एग्रीकल्चर? वी हैव 86% ऑफ द फार्मर्स दे आर स्मॉल एंड मार्जिनल. उसका इशू क्या हो जाता है उसकी वजह से? द एवरेज आउटपुट विच कैन कम फ्रॉम अ फील्ड वो कुछ ज्यादा नहीं होता है. इट इज हार्डली फॉर द बेसिक सर्वाइवल. दे आर नॉट एबल टू सेल, दे आर नॉट एबल टू मेक देयर लिविंग. Those kinds of problems were already changed by the Britain in the 17th and 18th century. So agriculture was already going towards consolidation. So labor force was ready. जिन लोगों ने agriculture छोड़ दिया था वो क्या कर सकते हैं? They can become part of the manufacturing processes. So that's why a labor force was required and came out of agriculture. इंडिया में भी जब भी आपको एक सजेशन देना हो in economy, if you want to improve the GDP of India, one thing is shift the labor form from agriculture to नॉन एग्रीकल्चर. और वही एग्जैक्टली इन लोगों ने किया था. वेल एस्टैब्लिश पोर्ट्स. इफ यू आर एन आइलैंड तो पोर्ट्स का तो इशू ही नहीं है. जिस डायरेक्शन में जाओगे पोर्ट मिलने वाला आपको, है ना, किसी भी डायरेक्शन में चले जाओ. देन geographical location, it is also very prominent, which is something of strategic between the east and the west. And finally, favorable climate. Britain is considered as having one of the best climate in the world, and in fact for the even for the human growth, okay, or the growth of the mind. अब इंडिया में क्या है, इतना हीट वेव चल रही है, आधे लोग बेचारा बाहर निकल के दिमाग काम नहीं कर रहा है, हीट स्ट्रोक्स आ रहे हैं. दैट्स व्हाई वी नीड फेवरेबल क्लाइमेट आल्सो. सो द टेम्परेट क्लाइमेट इज आइडियल फॉर द मैन्युफैक्चरिंग ऑफ कॉटन क्लोथ. तो कुछ कुछ प्रोडक्शन प्रोसेस के लिए भी चाहिए. जैसे कॉटन जो है उसको थोड़ा सा कैसा कैसा वाला एयर चाहिए. कॉटन को कैसा चाहिए होता है? ड्राई नहीं चाहिए होता, थोड़ा सा वेट साइड में चाहिए होता है. ठीक है, तो हर किसी का अपना एक स्पेसिफिक रिक्वायरमेंट होता है. सो along with this some very important inventions were also done by them, because देखो अगर साइंस एंड टेक में आगे नहीं हो तो इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन कभी नहीं होगा. These people came out with so many new innovations in the cotton industry. Like one of the most famous invention, one of the first one, it was flying shuttle. It was established by John Kay. And इसने क्या किया? It doubled the weavers output. कि एक इंसान जो एक बार ये बुन पाता वो डबल हो गया because of flying shuttle. Second came spinning jenny, invented by James Hargreaves. It would spin 8 times thread simultaneously. 8 तो आपका जो आउटपुट है वो एकदम से ड्रामेटिकली इंक्रीज हो जाता है, जो 1x से 8x हो गया. Then comes water frame, developed by Richard Arkwright. It could spin 128 threads at once. Then Crompton's mule, which has helped in the yarn production. And as a result of all these inventions, cotton industry boomed. You see the level of production. In 1700, it was how much? 500 ton. But by 1860, 5 lakh ton. This is industrial revolution. Okay. The industrial revolution started roughly around 1750. तो लगभग 100 साल के अंदर देखो उन्होंने कहां से कहां को प्रोडक्शन लेके चले गए. And that's why we call it industrial revolution. Revolution, the word itself means that fundamental changes are going to happen. And when fundamental changes happen, nobody can go back. Like today we have smartphone. Smartphone अब कभी नहीं जाने वाले हमारी जिंदगी से. It's a fundamental revolution. ना हर चीज के लिए हम डिपेंडेंट हो गए हैं. Previously they were also just for calling, but today entertainment, staying connected with people, social media, everything that we are consuming, it is coming through our phones, banking transaction, everything. So that's a fundamental change in our life. We cannot go back now. Possible ही नहीं है. Manchester came to be known as Cotonopolis because of the manner in which the cotton was produced. So that's why England became the harbinger of industrial revolution. Later on, for the iron industry, in 1709, Abraham Darby, he came out with a coke for the smelting process. Steam pump was developed. Then James Watt came out with the steam engine. उन्होंने वो develop किया. So iron also became very prominent industry by the early 19th century as a result of this. That's why innovations were very, very important. For transportation, steamboat was developed in 1802, locomotive by 1804, first passenger railway by 1830. इंडिया में कब आया था? 1853. Okay, and that जो फर्स्ट था उसका नाम भी उन्होंने क्या रखा था? द रॉकेट, है ना, मजेदार नाम रखा था. So these are the major inventions which we see. Later on, transatlantic steamships, iron ships, all those things were developed by the British. Then for the road and communication, John Loudon Macadam, he invented an effective and economical road construction method. जब भी हम इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन की बात करते हैं, we need forward and backward linkages, and those forward and backward linkages are going to be linked only on the basis of roads. रोड्स ही नहीं बनेंगे या रेलवे सेटअप नहीं बनेगा तो कैसे आपका इजिली इंपोर्ट एक्सपोर्ट होगा? जो भी चीज आपने करना है, या रॉ मटेरियल टाइम पे कैसे आएगा? So that's why it was required. Telegraph, this was also created first in 1835. Undersea cables were laid down by 1851. So telegraph became very important for the communication purpose. And urbanization, see the growth of cities. In 1750, only London and Edinburgh had population over 50,000. But by 1851, 100 साल के अंदर 29 cities were having that much population. So industrial revolution and urbanization, they were going simultaneously. ये सेम चीज हर जगह नहीं हो पाई, जैसे कि फ्रांस में ऐसा नहीं हो पाया. इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन स्टार्ट हुआ लेकिन अर्बनाइजेशन इतना नहीं हो पाया साथ में. बट इन इंग्लैंड इट वाज कंप्लीटली सिनोनिमस. ये भी बढ़ रहा है, वो भी बढ़ रहा है साथ में. So we see rise of many industrial centers. Okay. Then the second stage of industrial revolution, ये first phase था जो लगभग 1840 के आसपास तक चलता है, 1840 1850. The second phase starts from 1850 and goes up to 1880s. This second phase we have even more scientific innovations. We have more increase in the production levels. Industrial and commercial development, they also increased, and in fact there was also an impact of Napoleonic War. Commerce थोड़े टाइम के लिए dislodge हुआ, but again it eventually picked up. The industrial revolution reached a very high level during the post-war period after 1815. उसका उसका फिर से increase हो गया. Then many other achievements like Michael Faraday. Today all of us, our life are completely dependent upon electricity. So he was the one who invented the concept of electricity. Thomas Alva Edison, है ना, बिना लाइट की पढ़ाई कैसे करोगे? So he was the one who came out with the light bulb. So utilities in the life and the mass production continued with the period of time. Then Germany's industrialization, that also started after their After 1830s, they created one custom union known as Zollverein in 1834, and this became very helpful in their unification also. Diesel engine was brought in by Rudolf Diesel. हम तो डीजल ऐसे वर्ड यूज करते, कहां से आया डीजल वर्ड? रुडोल्फ डीजल, ही इन्वेंटेड द डीजल इंजन, एंड दैट्स व्हाई लेटर ऑन वी सी द राइज ऑफ ऑटोमोबाइल इंडस्ट्री. तो ऑटोमोबाइल इंडस्ट्री भी उसके साथ में चलने लग गई. प्रोमिनेंट जर्मन इंडस्ट्रीज, आयरन एंड स्टील प्रोडक्शन, केमिकल इंडस्ट्री, दे आर स्टिल द पायनियर. आज भी इनकी सबसे फेमस इनकी कंपनीज हैं, लीडिंग कंपनीज जैसे बायर एंड होइस्ट आर स्टिल द लीडर्स. Later on, if we comparatively see, so Germany emerged as the most important industrial country by the end of the 19th century. By 1899, by 1900, they were one of the most prominent, and they even surpassed Britain. USA became an important industrialized country only after their civil war, after 1865. Initially, it was not having that much of technology, but after the American Civil War, they were also going to take lots of steps in their eventual kickstart. They also have some famous people like Samuel Slater. He was a person who migrated from England, learned how to go for the production of the textile, and started the process in the USA. Then there was one Andrew Jackson, who is considered the father of industrial revolution there. Pre-Civil War innovation includes Samuel Morse telegraph and Elias Hobby's sewing machine. Post-Civil War, large number of things were brought in, like transcontinental railroad, okay, then light bulb, and eventually telephone, as all of us understand, by Graham Bell. Social and demographic changes also happened. Immigration increased on a very high level. That's why USA still remains the land of opportunities. Talent kept on coming from outside, and they were responsible for its growth and development. So large workforce ban gaye inke. However, as a result of this industrial revolution, which has begun in England and then spread to the rest of the part of the world, new challenges came on the scene for the humans, and the biggest challenge was how to distribute wealth. Because with the rise of industrial revolution, we see rise of capitalism, and with capitalism, what things come into the picture? We have one bourgeois class, and the second we have second proletariats. That's the problem which we see. Okay, so the owner of the new industries, they took away all the profits. However, the working class, it was suffering. There was no sufficient labor laws. The salaries were meager. Working conditions were completely problematic. So that's why it is a very famous quote that industrial revolution solved the problem of production, but not the problem of distribution of new wealth created. Production तो बढ़ा दी ताकि लोग कंज्यूम कर सकें, but जो उससे पैसा आ रहा है, प्रॉफिट आ रहा है, उसको कैसे डिस्ट्रीब्यूट करें, that problem could not be solved. And as a result of this, we see emergence of few new classes in the world history. And what are those? Bourgeois and proletariat. And in fact, this is the reason which is responsible for the rise of socialism and later on communism. Okay? These topics are directly connected. These topics are directly connected. This was the first PPT that we were discussing yesterday. Now let us start from the second one. Let me give you a little bit of perspective. 18th century, it's important for political revolutions, also economic revolutions. Political and social largely are American War of Independence and then French. Okay, American and French. When it comes to economic, it was Industrial Revolution. American Revolution was more or less settled. Its impact was largely initially to the Americans itself. Later on, it spread. However, French Revolution was very disturbing for the whole of Europe. This was bound to have consequences for the others. So the moment French Revolution broke out, it led to many wars. In fact, the other nations of Europe, they formed coalitions, and these coalitions were trying to bring back the pre-revolutionary France कि भाई तुम लोगों ने जो ये equality, liberty, fraternity शुरू किया इसको बंद करो किसी तरीके से. Why? Because the rest of the countries, they were still ruled by despotic rulers. So that's why lots of turmoil was going to happen in the whole of Europe, and this continued from 1789 till 1815 in two phases. The first phase is from 89 to 99. The second phase is from 1799 to 1815. During this phase, Napoleon became a legend. He first captured Italy, then he defeated Austria, then he defeated Prussia. He was never able to defeat England, okay, in a naval battle. That was his biggest weakness. Then he also defeated Russia. In fact, if we see the graph of the career of Napoleon, it goes something like this. He starts from 1796-1797 by capturing Italy, and the highest water point, it is 1807. In 1807, he was able to defeat Russia. Okay, so first 10 years of his life, he was a phenomena. It was very difficult to defeat him. But the anti-climax also started from 1808. So by 1808, he made one after the other mistake. In 1808, he tried to capture Spain, which led to a reaction against him, and it became an ulcer. Ulcer means initially it's a very small wound, but with the period of time that can even take somebody's life. That's why it is often said that Napoleon was destroyed by Spanish ulcer. That's a very famous statement. Why? Because he entered in 1808 with the objective that he is going to completely dominate Spain. However, the Spanish people, they led the guerrilla method of warfare, and as a result of this guerrilla method of warfare, there was no face-to-face wars, but this fight lingered on for 4 to 5 years. So he completely wasted his energy here. Then what he did? Then he fought against Russia. In fact, this expedition was the biggest disaster of his life. More than 60-70% of his army never came back. He tried to capture Russia during the winter time. Both Napoleon as well as Hitler have committed the same mistake, going to Russia during the winter season. There is no other enemy. The enemy is the climate. किसी को कुछ नहीं करना है. And they went out with a very famous strategy. The famous strategy was they burned down their cities and retraced. This was a strategy कि अब इतनी ठंड में क्या करेंगे, भूखे मरोगे. So that was the strategy utilized by the Russians. And as a result of this, when he was coming back from his Russian expedition, which was a failed one, there a coalition was formed, okay, and this coalition defeated him in the famous battle of Leipzig. So even more important than the battle of Waterloo is the battle of Leipzig, which happens in 1813. Okay, ये ध्यान रखना. Battle of Leipzig is the major battle. Why? Because after this he was made to abdicate. उन्होंने अपनी राजगद्दी छोड़नी पड़ी. He was made to abdicate his throne in 1814, and he was sent to Elba. Elba, it's an island, okay, just below France, where he lived for a year, but man bhara nahi. Then he came back. He came back from Elba, came back to France, okay, and he ruled for 100 days, and then he fought the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. After Battle of Waterloo, he was sent to Saint Helena. Saint Helena, it's a very small island between the South America and the south part of Africa. So small island है, where he lived for 6 more years. He died in 1821, and in fact before his death he was asked कि what went wrong, गलती क्या हुई, है ना, कि पढ़ाई क्यों नहीं की अच्छे से, what went wrong for you. So he said 3 things. 3 चीजों की गलती हुई मुझसे. Number 1, Spanish. Second is Russian. And third is with respect to Pope. He in fact has imprisoned Pope also, because Pope was not supporting his various methods. That's why he said three things. Okay, Russian expedition, Spanish ulcer, and Pope. These three things were responsible for my decline. In fact, many historians say that it was his insatiable ambition. कभी मन भरता ही नहीं था किसी चीज को एक्वायर करने के बाद, और के चक्कर में सब गवा दिया. So that's why we have to remember that Napoleon was a very important personality. However, he was defeated by 1815 completely. When he was defeated in 1815, a conference was formed. This is known as the Conference of Vienna or Vienna Congress. And this Congress was led by a person known as Metternich. He was from Austria. He was a reactionary. Why he was a reactionary? Reactionary means a person who was not accepting the liberal values. Like he was against equality, liberty and fraternity. He was against the forces of nationalism. And wherever there used to be any kind of people asking for their self-determination, he used to completely crush such kind of movements. And he had done that in Naples. He had done that in Spain. Just like Napoleon had dominated from 1799 to 1815, Metternich is going to dominate world history from 1815 till 1848. During these 3 decades, roughly 33 years, he will have one specific agenda, that Austria should remain the major power. Second, he was trying to ensure peace, because they had been fighting against France for last 25 years. From 1789 till 1815. So he said, I want peace here now. So that's why wherever there used to be any kind of disturbance, Metternich used to send his forces and they used to calm it down. So that's why from 1815 till 1848, there was a kind of peaceful period in the history of Europe. During this phase also, new kinds of development emerged, which we'll discuss now. So I hope the perspective is clear to all of you. Okay, let us try to understand it now. So Napoleon, his invasion of Russia ended in defeat. After his defeat, the final defeat, it came in the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, and after this he was exiled to St. Helena and he lived till 1821. Then after his era, we consider the next 40 years as unstable peace for nearly 40 years, because the next major war will come in 1853, Crimean War. तो लगभग हमारे 40 साल हो जाते हैं. Okay, and during this phase we see restoration of monarchy and all that. So when in 1815 when Metternich eventually took over the control of Congress of Vienna, he said कि जितने भी लोगों के साथ नेपोलियन ने गलत काम किया है उन सबको बचाएंगे अब सबसे. Okay, so he set few principles. He said that we are going to be bound by 3 principles. Number 1, principle of legitimacy. Like in France, the house which was ruling before Napoleon, it was the Bourbon dynasty, and the Bourbon dynasty was restored. Similarly, the dynasties were restored in other parts of the areas of Europe also. So principle of legitimacy. Second, he was believing in rewarding victors. Rewarding victors means those who have taken full faith in their capacity, like Prussia, Russia, Austria. They were given various kinds of territories. And the third, probably the most important principle, it was balance of power. That the neighbors of France should be made strong, otherwise France is always going to create hassle for them. And that's why the territories were given to the neighbors of the France, so that it can have a semblance of balance of power. Like Belgium was merged with Netherlands, Piedmont, Sardinia was given Genoa. Many of these countries, okay, they were given different territories. Like even Prussia was also given some of the land along the Saxony river. So France was to be encircled by strong state This was the concept of balance of power. These three major concepts you will remember. And in fact, whenever UPSC asks question, they either ask this as Vienna Congress or Metternich system. This was the Metternich system. This system rested upon the principles of reaction and कोई change नहीं होगा. No kind of application of equality, liberty, fraternity, nationalism. None of those forces were recognized by him. Okay. In fact, there is a very famous historian who says that when the world was becoming younger, Metternich was growing older. The world was trying to change. Previously, it was on the basis of despotism, on the basis of privileges, on the basis of the domination of church. The world was now changing, but Metternich was not ready for it. He wanted that जैसे पहला था वैसा ही होना चाहिए आज की डेट में, हमें कोई चेंज चाहिए ही नहीं किसी भी तरीके का. So as a result of this, okay, this phase is led by Metternich, and he leads this reactionary monarchical forces, and he operated through an organization which is known as Concert of Europe. आज तो concert का meaning अलग होता है, but that was known as concert. And he suppressed popular revolt in Naples, Spain. No liberty was allowed in European countries. Okay. However, what do we see? By this time, when new ideas come in front of you, you cannot just stamp them down for a very longer time period. There's a very famous quote, nobody can keep the idea down whose time has come. So that was the issue in 19th century Europe. Democracy, the spread of democracy and political liberty has already increased. Aspiration came among the liberal thinkers, and progressive, they advocated for democracy. So people were asking for it in different parts of the world. So you cannot keep it for a very long time. And that's why when Metternich was trying to bring everything down, people were again trying to increase their say. All right. So let us try to understand that. So during this time, post Napoleon, okay, from 1815 onwards, both Germany and Italy, they were trying to revive themselves. But it was not in the interest of Austria to have a Italy which is going to be unified. Why? Because the northern part of Italy, it was under the control of Austria. And similarly, Austria was also having domination among the German states also. So that's why this Italy and Germany, they were trying to ensure their unity during this time. So Congress of Vienna fragmented Italy into 8 states with northern Italy under Austrian control. So it was not in favor of nationalism. Similarly, Germany was organized into 38 states, and it was governed by Diet. Diet was a kind of parliament, and it was presided by whom? Austria. And nationality cause was not lost, but both Italy and Germany unified and emerged as nation state only by 1870s. In fact, there is a very famous statement that all the undoings of the 19th century were against the system of Vienna. जो भी इसने रोकने की कोशिश की, उसको बाद में लोगों ने अचीव किया. Okay, that 19th century is nothing. It is the undoings of the problems of the Vienna Congress, which is created. Again, the first major event after 1815, it again comes in where? France. So what happened in France? King Charles X, okay, King Charles X, he came to power in 1824. Little bit of background. In 1814, when Napoleon was dethroned, Louis XVIII came to power. He was a very old man, okay, बहुत old थे. The moment Napoleon came back in 1815, he ran away, भाग गया छोड़ छाड़ के कि मेरे बस की नहीं है सब देखना. But when Napoleon was defeated in the Battle of Waterloo, he was brought back कि नहीं राजा जी वापस आ जाइए. So he came back. So he continued till 1824 when he died. In 1824, the power went to Charles X. Okay, power went to Charles X. But this Charles X, he was a very reactionary person. He said that I want to again create the kind of regime which was before 1789. So that's why Charles X, he dissolved the legislative body, the Chamber of Deputies, suppressed press freedom, and even restricted the voting rights. So when he did all this, the people of Paris were not going to sit away. So what happened? Parisian uprising erupted, first major unrest since 1795, बहुत लोगों का भरा हुआ था ना, 30-35 साल से बैठे हुए थे, मौका मिलना है अपने को. And royal forces, they were overwhelmed by the revolutionaries, and as a result of this, Charles X again he fled, छोड़ छाड़ के भाग गए, and in his in the other throne, it was now passed down to Louis Philippe. Louis Philippe, he was from Orleans dynasty. Which dynasty? Orleans dynasty. So the Bourbon dynasty comes to an end in 1830. इसके बाद Bourbon dynasty का the end हो गया. Orleans dynasty comes to power. He came to the throne along with the middle class support. So 1830 remains a very important event in the European history. Why? Because this was first major setback to the system of Vienna Congress. They had went by the system of legitimacy कि भाई कोई भी जो legitimate ruler उसको हटा नहीं सकते, but यहाँ पे legitimate ruler was Charles X, but this was taken down by the people of France, and in fact it was accepted by all the powers. उन्होंने कहा चलो ठीक है, अब हो गया तो हो गया. But it happened very quickly. This revolution is also known as July Revolution because the events happened in the month of July. तो इसको हम July Revolution बोलते हैं. 1848 का जो revolution उसको हम Feb Revolution बोलते हैं. तो कभी क्वेश्चन में डायरेक्टली आ जाए the Feb Revolution, so you should know Feb Revolution is of 1848, July Revolution is of 1830. That's a basic thing you can remember. The impact of this can be seen even in other part of the world. Like Belgium, it gained independence from Netherlands, where it was merged in 1815. Greek independence also came from Ottoman Empire with the support of major European powers, and some remain unsuccessful. Like Polish revolt was also there, but it was crushed by Russia. Russia did not allow it to happen. So Europe was also affected by the revolution of 1830. In fact, as a result of this, Chartist movement also started in England, which we'll discuss later on. Then the second major revolution, it came in 1848. Why 1848? Because again the people were in unrest against the rule of King Louis Philippe. Okay, Louis Philippe, he was given the charge in 1830, but people were not very happy with his regime. He was following a foreign policy which was very subservient to the rule of England. तो लोगों को अच्छा नहीं लगता था कि यार मजा नहीं आ रहा, तुम लोग इंग्लैंड से लड़ाई नहीं कर रहे हो, दोस्ती करके बैठी हो. It was very spontaneous uprising in fact, and the crowd, it stormed into defenses and government building. Monarchy was overthrown. Okay, and what was the aftermath? A poet, a French poet, Lamartine, he became a leader of opposition, and one very famous socialist, Louis Blanc, he came to power, and he advocated for many socialistic reforms. So this was the February Revolution. It also had a lot of impact, and after this elections were held, and which favored moderate over socialist. Okay, and then the most important thing which we have to remember, it led to the rise of Napoleon III. Napoleon III, he was the nephew of Napoleon, and this person was now going to be considered as the president in 1848. Within 4 years of his becoming president, he is going to again coronate himself. So Napoleon के blood में ही है, पहले बनेंगे president या council, थोड़े दिन में कहना ही नहीं हमें राजा बनना था, गलती हो गई. So by 1852, he himself became the king. And in other parts of the world, what do we see? We see triumph of nationalism, nationalist movement, the rose in Hungary, Bohemia, Milan, Venice, and Charles Albert, he was ruling the area of Piedmont, Sardinia, Italy. He also declared war on Austria. And counter revolution, if we see, monarchs regained control by summer 1848, and by that time Metternich fled. Metternich fled to which country? England. भाग के सब लोग कहाँ जाते हैं हमेशा? England, because of rule of law. It's very difficult for anybody to get any kind of punishment there, है ना? जिंदगी भर rule of law चलता रहता है वहाँ पे. So anyway, after 1848, we see some other developments, but let us try to sum it up. Okay, so that when we discuss world history, the one specific theme is European history. This European history, it starts from French Revolution, it remains prominent from 1789 to 1799. Then comes Napoleon till 1815. Then comes the phase of two European revolutions from 1815 to 1848. So when we'll discuss will have specific classes on different phases. These are the various phases which we need to remember, starting from the causes of French Revolution. यहाँ से start होता है. Industrial Revolution had already started in 18th century. As a reaction to that, we see the rise of some socialist thinker. These socialist thinkers were thinking कि यार सारे पैसा जो है वो किसके पास जा रहा है? Capitalist. So there should be some way out. How can we improve the living conditions of the working class? So there were many people like Etienne Gabriel. Okay, he advocated for abolishing private property. उसको खत्म कर दो. Then there was a very famous personality, Francois Babeuf. He has written a famous book, The Conspiracy of Equals, in which he argued for common ownership of land. Okay, उन्होंने हर चीज के लिए बात किया. Then the first phase of the socialist people, it is known as utopian. Utopians means these people were having visions, बड़ी बड़ी visions थी इनके पास में, but उसका outcome कुछ आता नहीं था. ठीक है? This term was coined by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Why? Because these people, they focus on creating ideal cooperative communities, societies aimed for society without poverty or unemployment, and the major figure was Saint Simon, which includes the Charles Fourier and finally Robert Owen. So we'll discuss a little bit about these three personalities and the utopian phase of socialism. Why utopian phase? Because they were not going to go against capitalism as such. They said ठीक है, cooperation से भी तो चीजें ठीक हो सकती हैं. ठीक है? This is what the utopian socialism was all about. The first person was Saint Simon. Saint Simon, he was an aristocrat, participated in American War of Independence, strong believer in science and progress. He also criticized the contemporary French reform beginning in the grip of feudalism, and he said that they should be concerned for the poor. He wrote a book famously known as New Christianity. And he also said that property owners who held political power could hope to maintain themselves against propertyless only by subsidizing the advance of knowledge. Okay, so he was somebody who said that there should be some care for the poor people, Saint Simon. Then we have Charles Fourier. Okay, he was also a utopian person, and he eventually said that economic inequality can be overcome if everybody had the basic minimum. हर किसी कुछ तो कुछ होना ही चाहिए. And that he also said he saw harmony as the law of the cosmos and held that what is true for nature must be true for society. And he envisages a harmonious, self-contained cooperative society. क्या चाहिए इनको? Cooperative society, that we should have good connection with each other. Then Robert Owen. Robert Owen was probably one of the most influential personality. This person, he was an open critique of capitalism, opposed private property as well as profit motive, and he advocated for cooperative communities with combined industry and agriculture, promoted national education, reform in the law, and he was instrumental in the passing of Factory Act for the labor laws, or the safety conditions. And he developed a theory of utopian socialism based on social equality and cooperation, and he founded the famous Grand National Consolidated Trade Union and even organized the cooperative congresses. So all those things were done by Robert Owen. Then we have one more person known as Joseph Proudhon. So Joseph Proudhon, he was somebody who was a believer in anarchy. कि भाई ठीक है, स्टेट जो है उससे कुछ होने वाला नहीं है. And he used to say that property is theft. Okay, property is theft, and believed that labor should be the basis of social organization, and he was a believer in anti-statism. कि भाई state नहीं होनी चाहिए, and what should be there in without it? Federation of free communes. कि state में believe नहीं करता मैं, किस में believe करता हूँ? Federation of free communes. And he was also a person who believed in political activism. So these various people who were a believer in socialism, okay, could not get any kind of output. Input तो बहुत है इनकी theories में, लेकिन output निकल के नहीं आता है. And he was somebody who came out with this manifesto of the 60 demanding economic equality, influenced Russian anarchist also, whose name was Michael Buchanan, and his vision was to overthrow the state through general strike and replace it with democratically run cooperatives. So many people came during the initial phase of socialism, but the outcome was on the lesser side. Then Louis Blanc. Louis Blanc, he was somebody who was a believer in state socialism. He wrote this famous essay, Organization of Labor. जैसे आज की डेट में इंडिया में PSUs है, so PSU का लॉजिक क्या होता है? The ownership it rests with the गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया, है ना? और गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया जब चाहे कैपिटल इन्फ्यूज कर सकता है, उसको ऑर्गेनाइज करके रखता है. सेम काइंड ऑफ सेटअप ही वांटेड. व्हाट ही यूज्ड टू से दैट a scheme of state financed but worker controlled. जैसे अभी PSU वर्कर कंट्रोल नहीं होता, their ownership is with the government. Worker controlled social workshop that would guarantee work for everyone and lead gradually to a socialist society. This is his vision, and he was the person who came to power in 1848. He tried to present also, okay, and कुछ उन्होंने इसमें improve करने की कोशिश भी की फ्रांस में, but long term में it was not successful. So, the first phase of socialism is called as utopian because of certain factors. Why? There is a small difference between socialism versus communism. Whenever somebody says communism, Marxism, scientific socialism, meaning is same. In communism, they say private property should be abolished. There is no place for private property. Second, they said that there should be a mass revolution which leads to dictatorship of proletariat, and the end result is the establishment of communes. Okay, so this is communism. When somebody says socialism, socialism is something which is a believer in welfare. Key industry should be under their control. However, they are not a believer in the abolition of private property, and they are not a believer in the mass revolution. So all those early phases of socialism came to be known as utopian. Why utopian? Because they were trying to come out with a resolution within the framework of capitalism. They were not dealing with the roots of capitalism. The roots of capitalism lay in which specific thing? Private property. अगर private property को abolish कर देंगे तो capitalism is going to get down itself. They were not a believer in the class struggle. They were a believer in class cooperation. So that's why socialism believes, okay, in cooperation with capitalism, class cooperation, but all these things could not produce any kind of major result. Okay, कोई result नहीं आ पाया उसकी वजह से. And as a result of that, the whole shift it went towards communism. बाद में और अच्छे से डिस्कस करेंगे इसको बैठ के, बिकॉज हर साल एक क्वेश्चन 100% आता है. कभी कोई यूपीएससी ये क्वेश्चन पूछती है, व्हाट इज द कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स ऑफ द यूटोपियन सोशलिज्म. Okay, what new ideas were brought in by Karl Marx? Why is it called scientific socialism? It's scientific. Why? Because they were completely head on with capitalism. Okay, by coming out with the abolition of private property, they had given a specific kind of mobilization to the workers by saying, workers of the world, unite. They gave them class consciousness, and eventually a kind of part was also given that you proletariat are going to ensure dictatorship in the future. How? By defeating the capitalists. Okay, so that's why the socialism which was linked to Karl Marx becomes very famous. See his major contribution. He was a pioneer of socialism. Their ideas evolved into Marxism and communism, and he was the one who coined the term scientific socialism. What all are his works? His first major work, it is Communist Manifesto. It came in Feb 1848. Okay, in which he said, workers of the world, unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains. Then came the more detailed version known as Das Kapital. Okay, Das Kapital has 3 volumes. The first volume was published in 1867. In fact, Karl Marx was never alone. He was always having the help of his friend, and his name is Friedrich Engels. Friedrich Engels, in fact, he was from a wealthy family, so he used to support Karl Marx in monetary terms also. He used to help him in the refinement of the theory of the Marxism also. And when Karl Marx died in 1883, he continued the promotion of Marxism till he died in 1895. The UPSC asked this question once, that Frederick Engels did much more than Karl Marx for the promotion of Marxism. है ना, कि उसकी थियोरी को हेल्प करने के लिए इंसान किसी भी हद तक गया. So that's the kind of friend he was having, very lucky. So if we see Karl Marx, he believes in some specific core beliefs, like number one, it is historical materialism. He says that throughout the history of the human being, we have seen materialism as the core driver in shaping the history. And he came out with a theory that during the ancient world, okay, during the ancient world, it was the master who was torturing the slave. During the medieval world, it was the feudal lord who was executing the serf, or who was eventually exploiting the serfs. And the same thing is going to happen in the modern era unless proletariat fight for themselves against the capitalists. So he said historical materialism is something which is very prominent. Second, he is a believer in class struggle, that we have to fight. If we will not unite, eventually we will always be divided and we will never reach our objective. And that's why he was a believer in revolution. Okay, and not just a peaceful revolution. He was a believer in mass violent revolutions. And the first important revolution on the basis of Marxism, it was Russian Revolution, and the second one eventually was Chinese Revolution. These were the ideas which were put forward by him. His legacy is very prominent. He was part of the international. There were two major international which were supporting all the socialists of the world. So he was a part of that. Then he also led to the rise of many socialist parties in Germany, Belgium, Paris. Okay, and finally he was also responsible for the rise of Second International. By the time of Second International, he was no more, but his theories or his ideas of Marxism were responsible for its rise. During the same time, when we see the rise of socialism as well as the Marxism, England was also facing its first organized working class movement, and this working class movement is known as Chartism, okay, or Chartist movement. This movement rose because an act was passed by the Parliament of England in 1832. It is known as Reform Act. This Reform Act had not given voting rights to the working class, and many of their requirements were not fulfilled. That's why they came out with a charter, and इस charter उन्होंने 6 demands को put through किया. Number one, there should be universal suffrage for men. Everybody should have a right to vote. Second, they said secret ballot should be there. Otherwise, what is going to happen? Your master can always intimidate you for changing your vote. Third, they asked for no property requirement to become a candidate. भाई कोई भी qualification नहीं चाहिए. Otherwise, we can never stand up. Okay. And number four, salary should be given to the members of parliament, because working class cannot afford to stay there without salaries. Rich class that can sit there because it doesn't matter to them, but for the working class, they do need salaries. Equal electoral district, okay, ये होना चाहिए. And finally, annual parliamentary elections. This movement continued from 1838 till 1848. They used to collect signature, okay, of people. They used to put it to the parliament. However, it could not succeed. Why? Because the government was having a kind of mood of confrontation, and the moment they used to come, the Chartist strike and marches, both of them, they were brought down by the government, and internal divisions were also there, which led to the downfall. However, the biggest positive of this Chartist movement is that majority of its demand were brought in, or they were accepted by the Reform Act of 1867 and 1884. Only one demand was never accepted, and that was the demand of annual parliamentary इलेक्शन. है ना, हम सोचते हैं वन नेशन वन इलेक्शन 5 साल में एक बार होना चाहिए. चार्टिस्ट के हर साल इलेक्शन कर दो, तो फिर कैसे गवर्नमेंट क्या चलाएंगे फिर, है. तो दैट्स व्हाई इट वाज समथिंग व्हिच वाज not good for the governance perspective. So this was not accepted in the long run. The rest 5 demands, they were accepted. After 1848, we have 2 major areas which are now going to fight for their unification. The first one is Italy. See the map of Italy, okay. The only area which was ruled by an Italian king, this was Piedmont and Sardinia. Okay, these 2 areas were ruled by an Italian king. Rest of the territories, Lombardy and Venetia, they were under the control of Austria directly. These small Parma, Modena, Romagna, Tuscany, they were under the control of Austrian princes. Rome was under the control of Pope. Naples and Sicily, they were under the control of Bourbon dynasty of France. Okay, so Italy was very divided in nature, and this required some form of trust so that it could get unified. In fact, in 1848, Charles Albert, he was the king of Piedmont, Sardinia. So याद रखो इस नाम को, Piedmont and Sardinia. So its king was Charles Albert. So Charles Albert, he tried to fight against Austria, but in 1848 and 1849 he was defeated in the two famous battle of Custodia and Novara. He was defeated in Custodia as well as Novara. As a result of this, okay, as a result of this, what happened? He had to abdicate the throne. The throne was passed on to his son, Victor Emmanuel II, and the unification of Italy was bound to happen in the future, but somebody else was going to lead this. Okay, so let us just see quickly the unification of Italy. Before Napoleon, it was a patchwork of small states. When Napoleon captured Italy, he divided into how many parts? 3 parts. 3 parts में उसको divide कर दिया. Okay, he divided into 3 regions, but this was completely split off again by the Congress of Vienna. Just we have discussed, ये Congress of Vienna के time पे ही हुआ था, इतने parts में उसको divide कर दिया. Then the key players, the kingdom of Piedmont and Sardinia, it was in the northwest, and this was going to play a crucial role. Austrian Empire, it controlled northern Italy, Lombardy and Venetia, as well as some of the central Italian states like Tuscany, Parma and Modena. Papal states, they were ruled by Catholic Church in central Italy, and the kingdom of two Sicily, Naples and Sicily, this was under the control of Bourbon dynasty. So Italy was completely divided. It required a lot of strength. It required the work of many people who are going to be responsible for its unification. So if we see the process of unification, first initial work was done by Napoleon. Then we see rise of many secret society. The most famous secret society, it was Carbonari. It was a secret society of coal workers. They used to have meetings and they had 2 objectives, that we are going to ensure जितना भी foreigners लोग हैं इनको इटली से बाहर निकाल दे, and second, we are going to give the lawful help to our countrymen. So this was the objective of Carbonari. In 1848, as we have just discussed, Charles Albert, he tried to fight against Austria by war. However, he was defeated, and that's why he has to abdicate his throne. So this is till 1848. The major process of unification only starts after 1848. उसके बाद ही start होता है. And 3 people played a very important role: Mazzini, Cavour and Garibaldi. Mazzini is just like we have Mahatma Gandhi in India. Similarly, we have Mazzini in Italy. He was somebody who was a believer in Italian unity. Second is Cavour. Cavour, he was a very pragmatic politician, and he was from the Piedmont, Sardinia itself, and he wanted to utilize each and every event for the process of the unification of Italy. Number 3 is Garibaldi. Garibaldi, he was a machinery, okay, he was a mercenary, and he utilized eventually all the weapons for the process of Italian unification. So even उनको adjective भी दिया जाता. Mazzini is the soul of Italian unification, Cavour is the mind or the brain, and Garibaldi, he is the sword. In fact, Victor Emmanuel II, their king, is considered the wisdom behind the Italian unification. So 4 personality played a very important role along with their king. Mazzini, if we see the case of Mazzini directly, he was born in Genoa. He became part of Carbonari secret society. Later on, he established a famous movement known as Young Italy movement, and this Young Italy, they used to advocate Italian unification. Okay, then he also participated in the efforts of unification in 1848. He also joined the Roman Republic after uprisings in northern Italy. When Republic fell, he continued advocating for unification. So Mazzini remains a very important personality for the Italian unification. Then we have Cavour. Okay, Cavour was inspired by nationalism. He used to believe in Risorgimento. Risorgimento means the resurgence of Italians. He was the Prime Minister of Piedmont, Sardinia, and he was going to use both diplomacy as well as war for the purpose of Italian unification. Let us try to understand it. So there was a war which was fought between Russia as well as Britain. Britain and France, they were on the same side and they were fighting against Russia. This war is known as Crimean War. I hope all of you know today Crimea is under the control of Russia because that's the very important inlay into the Black Sea. और उसको किसी को भी ट्रेड करना तो किसका कंट्रोल चाहिए? क्रीमिया रीजन का चाहिए. So that's Crimea. This war was going on. During this war, he sent few soldiers from Piedmont, Sardinia. Around 18,000 soldiers were sent. ऐसा ही कि हम आपके दोस्त हैं इसलिए भेज रहे हैं. The moment Britain, France won, this war continued from 1853 to 1856. In 1856, Paris conference was held. In this conference, Cavour internationalized the issue of Italians. He said that the Austrian people are misruling us and we need help from Britain as well as France. So France, it became relatively empathetic towards Italy. यार इन लोगों को कुछ help करते हैं. That's why in 1858 they signed a pact. This pact is known as Lombards Pact. And as per this pact, there was a condition that if Austria is going to fight against Piedmont, Sardinia, then France is going to help it with how many soldiers? 2 lakh soldiers. हम 2 लाख लोगों को भेज देंगे if Austria-Hungary is going to attack Piedmont, Sardinia. So the moment this was signed, Cavour started provocation. उन्होंने troops को mobilize किया towards the Austrian border. Austria gave an ultimatum, but he ignored that, and that's why Austria started the attack in April 1859. The moment the attack started, the help came from Napoleon, okay, Napoleon III, but later on he signed a peace treaty without giving any kind of warning to Piedmont, Sardinia. उन्होंने क्या treaty sign कर लिया with Austria and the Treaty of Villafranca. Cavour was disappointed. He resigned also after this. However, after this fight, they were able to get one of the territory. Austria still retained Venetia, northern part of Italy, the easternmost, okay, but Lombardy became a part of Piedmont, Sardinia. This was the first war which gave some kind of area to Piedmont, Sardinia. So Lombardy became a part of it. After Lombardy, the major role was played by Garibaldi. Garibaldi, he went to Naples and Sicily. He was able to capture Sicily first, then he also captured Naples, and after that he gave both these territory to the Piedmont, Sardinia. And as a result of this, in 1861, the coronation of the King Victor Emmanuel II was done. However, 2 territories still remained outside their control. One was Venetia. Venetia they got in 1866 when the war was fought by Bismarck against Austria-Hungary. So they also supported, so उस time पे उनको मिल गया. And last comes in 1870. In 1870, France fought a war against Germany, okay, the northern confederation of Germany. In the Battle of Sedan, they got lost. At the same time, Rome was captured by Italy. So Italian unification, it has happened in many parts, and many of them, they are simultaneous with the unification of Germany. That's why we often say that there are so many phases of collaboration between the Italy and the Germans for their unification process. So this is how the unification process ends. The other state which is required to be unified, it is Germany. Germany was a very relatively different kind of strategy. Like if we see, this was the kingdom of Prussia. Okay, this was Prussia. It was divided into 2 parts, West Prussia and East Prussia. Alright, then eventually this is the area of Austria, and they had so many internal states. Okay, so many states are there. In fact, there was a time when there were more than 300 states. They were merged into 39 states by Napoleon. In the case of Italy, the question was very straightforward. कि कौन lead करेगा unification? The answer was Piedmont and Sardinia. However, in the case of Germany, the struggle was also internal. 2 major states were there, Austria and Prussia, and the rest of the lesser German state. Okay, Austria, Prussia, and lesser German state. Austria, it was having an empire along with Hungary, so it was never a pure German state. यहाँ पे बहुत सारी nationalities थी. But if you see the case of Prussia, Prussia was pure German state. The rest of the states, they were more closed because of domination of Austria. So the question was, lead कौन करेगा? Okay. So if you see the process of unification of Germany, this also have two phases. The first phase, it was the liberal phase. Okay. And in the liberal phase, if we see the roots of nationalism, they were sowed by intellectuals like Herder and Schlegel and even Fichte. Napoleon also did a very important or played a very important role in the unification of Germany. He is considered as the father of modern Germany. Why? Because he created Confederation of Rhine. More than 300 states, they were merged into 39 states. That is the Confederation of Rhine. Congress of Vienna. This Congress of Vienna replaced the Confederation of Rhine with the German Confederation of 39 states and was put under whose control? Austrian control. So Austria was very dominant, and during this passive phase, okay, they were trying to do it through constitutional measures. In fact, there was an assembly known as Frankfurt Assembly. This Frankfurt Assembly tried to pass on the throne to Prussian king. Pass on throne to Prussian king. But the biggest problem was कि हमें Great Germany चाहिए या फिर Little Germany चाहिए. Great Germany, which included Austria, and Little Germany, which excluded Austria. This was the biggest debate in the Germany. Okay, the crown was offered to Prussian king, who refused to accept it. Why? Because he thought that if he will accept the crown, who is going to fight against him? Austria. कि how can you take the leadership of all the German states? That's why the major process of unification only starts with the entry of Bismarck. Bismarck became their chancellor in 1862. He said, "ये सब parliament से हमें crown नहीं चाहिए. I follow the policy of blood and iron. I'm going to just fight some wars, and that will be the end of it." So the moment he came to power, he first modernized the army of Prussia. The moment modernization was done, he fought three major wars. First war was fought with Denmark, second was fought with Austria, and third was fought with France. And with the help of this, he was able to establish unification by 1871. Let us see this in a little bit of detail. Why they had to fight against Denmark? Denmark remained a big problem for them. Why? Because two small German areas, Schleswig and Holstein, they were under the control of Denmark, but only nominal control. Completely उनका part नहीं थे. So what happened? In 1863, the King of Denmark incorporated them into their kingdom. Bismarck proposed to Austria that let us start a joint action against Denmark. Denmark was defeated in 1864. Treaty was signed, and they surrendered both Schleswig as well as Holstein to Prussia and Austria. Then, as all of us understand, he never liked Austria, but he could never humiliate them also. Okay, so that's why he had to be very, very precise. So Bismarck said that separate administration should be there for the duchies. एक नहीं रखेंगे उनके लिए. That's why they divided Schleswig and Holstein among themselves. So this convention was signed in 1865, Convention of Gastein. As per this, Holstein was given to Austria and Schleswig was given to Prussia. This is the first phase of German unification. Then comes the conflict. Austria appealed that the issue of Diet of German Confederation is violating the Convention of Gastein. However, Bismarck said, no, this is not doing anything. Bismarck started mobilizing the Prussian troops, and this famous war was fought in 1866. This is known as the Battle of Sadowa, also known as the 7 Weeks War. When the war was about to start between Austria and Prussia, France thought कि ये दोनों तो बिल्कुल टक्कर के लोग हैं. They're going to fight for a long time. In the end, I am going to decide the outcome of the war. He did not know at that point of time, Napoleon III, that Prussia is very, very strong. And when Prussia was able to defeat Austria in 3 weeks, whole of France was up in arms. They were saying कि हमने बहुत बड़ी गलती कर दी ये war करने देंगे इनको. That's why a swift and decisive action was taken by Prussia in the Battle of Sadowa. Prussian military leaders, they favored capturing Vienna, but Bismarck opposed further escalation. Why? Because he knew that his number one enemy is not Austria, that is France. Because France would never like a major country on its borders, and that's why he signed the Treaty of Prague. इज्जत से बात किया उनके साथ, बिल्कुल में गलती हो गई, ऐसा हो जाता है कभी कभार वॉर वगैरह, है ना. So let us just stop it right here in itself, so that he can ensure neutrality of Austria in the next war. He was very calculated person. He knew कि ज्यादा बेइज्जती करेंगे तो बाद में आके हमारे ऊपर ही उल्टा पड़ेगा. The moment he won against Austria, he created North German Confederation of 22 northern German state, and then the next move was the defining move. This was the move against the France. France was the most powerful nation. It was the most respected nation. But if Germany wants to increase its stature, they need to defeat them itself. The biggest issue, it came over the Spanish throne. Okay. Then Prussian Prince Leopold, he sent his candidature for the throne of Spain, but this was not liked by the French. कि भाई इस एरिया में तुम क्यों आ रहे हो? Because we have our own dynasty in this area. So that's why Leopold initially declined, but Bismarck desired a stronger provocation. Bismarck manipulated a diplomatic exchange, okay, in which he tried to show that the German king has in a way insulted the French ambassador. And when this happened, French, they started the war against the Northern Confederation of Germany, and eventually in this war, in this famous war, Prussia became victorious and they were defeated in the Battle of Sedan. And in 1870, they were completely defeated. After their defeat, they had to also sign the Treaty of Frankfurt. This Treaty of Frankfurt is very important. Why? Because this created a problem between Germany and France. They could never see face to face. Why? Because this led to capture of one area of France, Alsace-Lorraine, by Germany, and that's why they became the kind of enemies for the ages. And they, during the both First World War as well as Second World War, same issues are going to be instrumental in their fight. Payment of a very hefty war indemnity, बहुत बड़ी war indemnity भी ली इन लोगों से. Alright, so German unification, it was also announced in the Versailles. Versailles was the palace of the king of France. बेइज्जती करने के लिए उन्हीं के वहीं, है ना. Like suppose if this kind of steps were taken, people will be completely infuriated. बिल्कुल गुस्से में रहेंगे वो उनकी वजह से. That's why Bismarck eventually became the most powerful person in Europe. Germany became the leader, and France from this time onward required a friend, because on its own it could not fight against Germany. अब उसको किसी और दोस्त की requirement होगी. And that's why from this time onwards we see a system of alliances. The system of alliances would be started initially by Bismarck, and later on this will be also pursued by the countries like France, Russia as well as the Britain. But the system will be started from here itself. If we see the case of France, here the king was Napoleon III, but thereafter Napoleon III, he was dethroned, and finally they again became republic. इनका कुछ नहीं समझ में आता कि king चाहिए या फिर republic चाहिए. Again they shifted to republic. So this became their which republic? Third republic. Third republic, it came in France. With the rise of Italy and Germany, yesterday when we were discussing about imperialism, after 1870 imperialism also reaches very high level. Why? Because this new country also wanted more and more territory under their control, because it was linked to their prestige. कि हमारी इज्जत का सवाल है. फ्रांस और ब्रिटेन के पास पूरी दुनिया है, हमारे पास क्या है? कुछ भी नहीं है. So that's why the imperialism reaches a very high level after their unification. During this phase, Asia, Africa, they were colonized. England led the world in capitalism. Increased demand for market and raw material led to imperial expansion, competition for trade and colonies, and finally rising tensions. So imperialism is a theme which is going to continue along with the other events. Okay. So why do we see the rise of imperialism? We see breakdown of various barriers. Barriers means जहाँ पे trade के barriers कम हो गए. Western European economy experienced significant growth. The reduction of trade and economic barriers facilitated economic activity and prosperity. If you want to grow rapidly, you need unhindered access to raw material. हमेशा आ जाना चाहिए. And then you need a मार्केट ऑल्सो, सो दैट उसको आप सेल कर सके. तो सबसे अच्छा तरीका क्या है? यू शुड हैव ए colony. That's why imperialism became very prominent here. So initially capitalism was characterized by free competition, but later on many states started putting many regulations to them, and later on by mid 19th century we see the rise of imperialism on a very large scale, and the major role it was played by Germany as well as Italy. The government, they were also very influential in this, okay, and that's why the word which is often utilized for this phase, it is known as scramble. You know, टुकड़ों के लिए भाग रहे थे इधर से उधर, कुछ कुछ चाहिए हमें. If we see what was the need of raw material, mass production, industrial desire, imperialism was a major factor for market and raw material. Key participant includes England, France, Belgium, Italy and Germany were new. United States also entered. Previously United States was not that much interested in colonies, but by 1898 it also entered by defeating Spain and capturing Philippines for the first time. And this stage of imperialism is known as new imperialism. Why? Because it was very fast. पहले देखो इंडिया को कैप्चर करने में कितने साल लगे थे? 100 साल लगे. From 1757 till 1856, 100 साल लग गए. But in the case of Africa, it was rapid. Like you see here, in 1876, how much percentage of Africa was conquered? 10%. And by 1900, nearly all of Africa was colonized. तो 25 साल में पूरा कॉन्टिनेंट खा गए. So that shows scramble for Africa, and this is something which led to large number of colonial rivalries. In fact, one of the major area of tussle in Africa, it was Morocco. We have seen Moroccan one crisis and Moroccan second crisis. So Africa remained a major problem. In Asia, China was divided among various countries, and they were known as sphere of influence. If you see the shape of China, it is like a watermelon. That's why there's a very famous title, the cutting of melon. Okay, because China was divided by Britain, France, Russia, Germany. Japan captured Korea as well as Taiwan. Southeast Asia, France conquered Indochina, US took Philippines, and Iran, it was partitioned by both Britain as well as Russia. That's why the remaining part of the world, जो भी बचा कुचा हिस्सा था, इंडिया तो ऑलरेडी कंट्रोल में था, तो उसको तो अभी कोई लेगा नहीं. जो बचा हुआ हिस्सा है उसके ऊपर सबने लड़ाई करना शुरू किया, and eventually this was the age of imperialism. This imperialism led to large number of colonial battles. European military advantages were already there, so they were able to defeat the native people with that. And this partition of Africa, this was the major project of whom? King Leopold II. Belgium के King Leopold II है, whose personal initiative it was. France occupied Tunis. He was able to even जो इटली चाहता था उसको उन्होंने कैप्चर कर लिया था. They captured Ivory Coast, Dahomey as well as Madagascar. Belgium got Congo. Belgian Congo went to Belgium itself. By 1883 secured control over Egypt, Uganda, Zanzibar, etc. ये सब भी फ्रांस ने ले लिया. Germany was able to capture Togoland, Cameroon, Southwest Africa, German East Africa, and as a result of this, Africa became the major hot ground for imperialist rivalries. Few territories remain, like Liberia and Ethiopia. They were completely independent, and Morocco was independent to some extent because it was under the control of France, which is going to be contested by Germany later on. So imperialism also was going to rise during the same time period, and this monopoly capitalism eventually led to full-fledged imperialism. What is monopoly capitalism? Where you have control over raw material, you have control over market, but now you are not paying for anything. That's why it becomes imperialism. Okay, so they got monopoly industry, surplus profit, investment in colonies, and alliance of industry as well as finance. All these things eventually led to World War I. Okay, the World War I, the two major reasons for the World War I that we have. Number one is the rivalry between France versus Germany, which divided the whole continent. Second, it's imperial rivalry or imperialism, which we see in places like Africa, Asia. All these factors are going to combine. Then the rise of military powers across the world, in use of resources from industrialization, then destabilization of Eastern Europe. In Eastern Europe, there was a rivalry which was igniting between Austria-Hungary and Serbia. Okay, Serbia, it wanted the Slav people. There is a specific ethnic group known as Slav. He wanted these people to be under their control, or at least within themselves. But Bosnia was captured by Austria in 1908. At that point of time, Russia could not help. Russia was defeated. Russia wanted help of France, but France was also not that much powerful. That's why in 1908, the Bosnian crisis created a very big rivalry in Eastern Europe. They eventually fought two Balkan wars in 1912 and 1913. In 1914, we have the biggest event, which is known as the murder of French Ferdinand, which was done by whom? Gavrilo Princip in Sarajevo, which is the capital of Bosnia. As a result of this, Austria-Hungary gives an ultimatum to Serbia. Serbia was given support by Russia. The moment Russia mobilized, Germany also gave support to Austria-Hungary. The moment Germany broke the neutrality of Belgium, we see the entry of also England into the war. So this is how a localized Eastern European war becomes a world war. इसको हमेशा ध्यान रखना. There's a difference between these two. It was not Austria-Hungary and Serbia which created the first world war. No, that was a specific event. But that event became a world war because of the rivalry between these groups. Because of imperialistic rivalries, because of the military prowess of those times. So that's why whenever we read First World War, we cannot read it just isolatedly. कि भाई ठीक है बस फ्रेंच फर्डिनेंड का मर्डर हुआ और वर्ल्ड वॉर 1 स्टार्ट हो गया. Okay, so if we see the pre-war politics of Europe, Germany was becoming the most powerful. They were having the highest colonial ambition, and they also wanted eastward expansion. If we see France wanted to take the revenge of its humiliation in 1871. It wanted to again have more colonial ambitions. Russia wanted to control the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles, जो कि आपका Black Sea से connect करता है. So that's why every power was having few objectives, and these objectives were going to be very problematic to bargain with each other. Italy was also having territorial ambition, and it was against Austria and even Turkey. Britain was having one of the highest growth in the industrial arena at that point of time. It wanted to reduce its market competition. Japan was trying to control the area of eastern part of Asia. Okay, so Japan was also rising. It was recognized by USA, even UK later on. Scramble for China was going on. China was getting cut by various powers, and that's why later on Japan was also able to defeat Russia. So when Russia was defeated in 1904-05, Russia became very weak. Okay, and this is the reason why they eventually went into the system of alliances. Japan was able to take Korea, and later on it was able to even capture many part of China also. Let us now understand the causes of war. So causes of war, when we see the first one, it is because of the strategy of Bismarck. What did Bismarck do? Bismarck की क्या responsibility है for First World War? He isolated France, and they also lost Alsace and Lorraine. He created this three emperor league along with Austria-Hungary as well as Russia. Later on, he formed a triple alliance by 1882. Dual alliance बना था 1879 में, triple alliance by 1882. So the first time peacetime military alliance system was created by whom? Bismarck, and this is his responsibility. Had Europe not been divided into the alliance system, then we would not have had a world war. रुक जाते हैं ना किसी टाइम पे जाके, जैसे आज की डेट में alliance system नहीं है as such. Okay, that's why we are not seeing any kind of major wars. But in those times, alliance systems were there. Franco-Russian alliance, this was formed in 1894. The moment Russia lost, okay, the moment Russia lost, so they also realized, Britain and France, कि भाई ठीक है हम दोनों साथ में दोस्ती कर लेते हैं. So Britain was able to come out with a friendship with Japan also, and later on they also signed the Triple Entente. So by 1907, Britain, France and Russia, these three became close to each other. First it was France and Russia, then it was Britain and France, and finally all three eventually became a part of Triple Entente by 1907. So Triple Alliance was done by 1882. The Triple Entente, it was found by 1907. So by the opening decade of the 20th century, Europe was divided into a system of armed camps. जहाँ सिर्फ एक spark चाहिए, वो spark कहाँ से आया? Eastern Europe से आया. Second, it was Moroccan crisis. Moroccan crisis created the rivalry between the French and the Germans, and twice they had to be conference. The first conference was in Spain, Algeciras conference, but England supported France. That's why Germany was very upset because of that. And later on also, the same crisis re-emerged by 1911. The biggest crisis was Bosnian crisis. Why? Because Austria-Hungary, as per the Treaty of Berlin 1878, was having the control of administration of the area of Bosnia, but उसको कभी annex नहीं कर सकता था. But they annexed it because a young Turk movement has started in 1908. जैसे उन्होंने उसको annex किया, the first one to come out with reaction was Serbia. Why? Because Slav people used to live in Bosnia, and when there could not be any conference, Serbia was looking for any kind of event in which it can take revenge against Austria. Then comes the Balkan War. The first Balkan War, it was fought against the Ottomans and all the European part of the Ottoman Empire, that was gone. The second Balkan War, it was started by Bulgaria because Bulgaria was unsatisfied with what it got in the first Balkan War. It attacked Serbia, but later on all the countries came together and they defeated Bulgaria. So in 1913, in the Eastern Europe, Serbia became a major country. When Serbia became a major country, they were having only one objective, and that is the decimation of Austria and Hungary. So one famous personality, Gavrilo Princip, he eventually murdered French Ferdinand, and this is how on 28th of June 1914 assassination was done. Within 1 month, 28th July, Serbia was attacked by Austria. Germany declared war on Russia and France by 1st of August. Britain's involvement, if we see, German violation of Belgian neutrality. The moment the troops of Germany went through Belgium, Britain also came into the war, and then Britain demanded Germans withdrawal from Belgium. However, when it was not done, the war was declared by 4th of August. So a war which could have been a localized war by 28th of July eventually turned into a world war by 4th of August. ठीक है, तो एक हफ्ते में यहाँ से यहाँ दुनिया चेंज हो सकती है. And the moment it became a world war, it was going to have very high level of consequences. Okay, so that's why we have large number of consequences later on. These are the alliances which you have to remember. Even though there was a triple alliance, but Italy did not participate. So the two major power remains Germany and Austria-Hungary. Italy signed one more treaty in 1915, Treaty of London with Britain, and it did not support Germany and Austria-Hungary. In fact, later on they were supported by Bulgaria as well as by the Turkey. They came to the same side. Okay, and on the other side we have Russia. Britain is there, France is there, Russia is there, Italy was there, Serbia was there. They were on the same side. When the war started, the colonies also had to participate. So countries like India, they also supported the war efforts of the Great Britain. So that's why a European war became a world war because of the colonies' participation. If we see the course of the war, the German invasion started, they took care of Belgium, then the Eastern Front, they also started against Russia. Battle of Marne is very famous because it was a counter-attack by the French. Conquest of the German colonies by the British Naval Command in the areas of Africa also. And then the trench warfare where they dug the trenches and then eventually fight. Okay, so this is how the course of the war continued. One of the most famous battle is the Battle of Somme. Okay, why? Because the British offensive near the river Somme, along with Britain, this decided the war's outcome in favor of allies. Then one of the largest naval battle, it was the Battle of Jutland. Jutland, it is in Denmark where it was fought. Russia went through a revolution in 1917, and that's why it eventually get out of the First World War, and they signed a separate treaty with Germany known as Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. Okay, so this treaty was signed by them and they left the war, and in fact this is the reason why Britain as well as France, they were very unhappy कि हमें लड़ाई में छोड़ के अकेला चला गया. स्टार्ट भी रशिया नहीं करवाया था. Had Russia not supported Serbia, this would not have become a world war. Finally, America also entered the First World War. Why? Because Germany, it was carrying on with this submarine warfare, and they were responsible for the sinking of one of the ship in which how many Americans' lives were lost? Around 128. And that US declared warfare, and eventually the Allies started deserting Germany during the 1918. So first Austria signed armistice, then we see defeat of Bulgaria and Turkey, and they also surrendered, and then later on Germany also signed an armistice by 1918, and later on they signed the Treaty of Versailles. Okay, so this is how we have to remember the peace conference. It was held in Paris. Three major leaders were there: Woodrow Wilson from USA, Lord George from UK, and George Clemenceau from France. Okay, and 14 points of Wilson were the one which were to be considered, which included open diplomacy, freedom of seas, free trade, arms reduction. तो बहुत ही आपके यूटोपियन पर्सनालिटी थे, आइडियलिज्म से भरे हुए थे, and that's why he came out with his 14 points which were not considered officials by the other leaders. They said कि भाई ठीक, इसने कब कहा ऑफिशियल नहीं है. Then this treaty was signed on 28th of June 1919. Very harsh treaty. Why harsh treaty? Territorial changes. Alsace-Lorraine, it went back to France, taken from the Treaty of Frankfurt. सार वैली, it also was given for 15 years कि जब तक आपका पैसा वैसा नहीं आया था तब तक हम सार वैली लेंगे. Poland, it was created. This is going to be the biggest reason why Hitler was against Poland, because some of the territory of Germany, it was made part of Poland. Overseas possession, जितना भी अफ्रीका के territory था, it was taken away by the powers Britain and France. Rhineland was demilitarized. Eastern Europe, provinces ceded by Russia, है ना, उन्होंने कुछ territories दी थी, including Finland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. They were declared as republic and independent. Poland, this was also re-established. Disarmament. Germany was now going to have only 1 lakh soldiers in the army, which is going to lead to its destabilization. Union was forbidden. They could never sign a union pact with Austria. Merge नहीं हो सकते थे दोनों countries. War guilt, कि आपने responsibility लो और हमें पैसा भी दो. The money was around 6.6 billion pound. 6.6 billion pound war reparations. And then they also started the trial of the king, William II. Okay, Kaiser William II. But he eventually fled to Netherlands और वहाँ पे फिर कुछ हुआ नहीं as such. So this is how Germany was completely incensed, and this was going to have a big impact on their future history. This will start tomorrow from Russian Revolution, because Russian Revolution is again a linked in topic in between. And आप इसको हल्का सा रिवाइज करके आना. In this PPT, we have Russian Revolution, then we have the topic of League of Nations. Okay, then we'll discuss rise of fascism and Nazism. Tomorrow we'll try to finish off majority of the topics. If something is left, we'll take it a day after tomorrow. All right, so that's it for today. We'll meet tomorrow.